The crew chief opened the sliding door of the helicopter and kicked out some stairs. He looked around and then pointed to Doug and motioned to himself. Doug threw his pack around to carry on his chest and ducked low to approach the giant helo. As he got closer and closer, the wake pushed him back, but the rotors were only at a quarter power, so not too bad. After getting used to the pressure, Doug walked the few more feet in the snow, then looked inside. 11 other people, including a pilot. The guy that opened the door said, "I'll take your pack." He had to yell because the rotors were fairly loud. The rotors made the area circling the helicopter like a miniature snow tornado. Standing in the snow swirl was very uncomfortable, and Doug wanted to get inside as soon as possible. He readjusted his shemagh to make sure it didn't go flying off, and some more of the snow didn't get in. Then he zipped up the collar on his jackets. Doug then handed the guy his pack, and the guy handed Doug's pack back to someone else. Then the guy reached out, thinking it was Doug's turn to get on the helicopter, but it wasn't. Doug moved out of the way, and Challenger came into view. The guy stepped back in a comical fashion, as if that would somehow prevent the next series of events. Doug pointed up into the helicopter, and that's all that Challenger needed. She was so big she could stretch out into the helicopter with the front part of her body by getting back on her back legs, and then she hopped in, seeing that there was room for her. Having nobody now to help him climb in, Doug clambered into the helicopter by himself. Challenger was already going person to person and shoe to shoe, downloading the information off of everyone. She wiggled and shoved her way through the aisles and made sure she got everyone, her tail hitting several people in the face as she progressed. When she had completed making sure everyone was okay to be on the same helicopter as Doug, Challenger stopped at a spot that had room for both of them, and she slumped down in a big hairy ball. He made his way past everyone. He noted a few specialty precision rifles as he passed, including a Dragunov and a PSG-1. They were all pointed down, as is appropriate on a helicopter, then sat down next to the seat that Challenger had found. Upon seating, Doug thanked her for finding both of them a seat. This made her happy, and she smiled, letting her giant teeth and oversized tongue flop out. Doug got her bowl out of her pack, and it sprung to full size. Then Doug squirted some water in from the tank in his new pack and set her dish down. She drank it all, then picked the bowl back up and handed it back to him. Doug took the bowl and collapsed it back down and shoved it in her pack. She thought for a second as if doing some extremely complicated trigonometry calculation, and then shook, covering everyone in the cabin in water. Doug found this extremely hilarious, but he had to almost bite himself to stop from laughing. He silently patted her on the head, as if this was the right thing to do. Before anyone could really say anything, the rotors sped up and the helicopter took off. Apparently Doug was the last one that needed to get on. He didn't see a lot of vehicles in the parking lot below, so maybe there had been multiple stops. There's no way these people could have carpooled here in that few vehicles with all their gear. Everyone was quiet, though, so Doug stayed quiet, and after a moment of liftoff, they were away. Chapter 16, Doug. Up and away, morning, day 1. The cabin was surprisingly quiet due to all the new technology that had come through, and you could theoretically talk if you wanted. Usually you needed headsets for everyone and then communicated over radios, but that wasn't the case here. We were cruising at what felt like over 100 miles per hour, and still nobody talked. Challenger didn't seem to mind. Doug had tried to drive her around on the freeway a bit, so she was used to the motion and speed. He was able to get around 85 miles per hour safely where he was at without getting into trouble, and she handled it fine. This seemed to be no different. She lay there seemingly bored. She probably wanted to go play in the snow some more. She probably would be in the snow again soon. It was snowing so hard, and they were going so fast that Doug didn't even bother trying to look outside. The chairs were relaxing, and it was warm enough in the cabin that Doug was able to unzip most of his layers. Everyone else had done the same. Doug was wearing his warm layers, but not his winter rain layers. It hadn't been nasty enough at his house, only around 20 degrees or so. Sub 20, though, you never knew what was going to happen. Could be freezing rain, hail, sleet. The Pacific Northwest had 50 names for the stuff. Doug had thought about snowshoes, but knew he could fashion his own if he absolutely had to. Only had to make sure he didn't cut himself in the process. He'd relaxed in his chair for a little bit, and Challenger had dozed off when a voice came over the loudspeaker. This is your captain speaking. You can identify as me as Mike for the purpose of this excursion. We're cruising at an altitude of blah 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 blah, going about 120 whatever. We expect to reach a nice prepared landing zone in a little under 2 hours. Crossing the storm barrier would be dangerous, so forget that. We have to get there in some sort of arc fashion. Also, we have an incoming transmission from the host of this trip, so everyone, listen up. A voice, not one originating from the helicopter, but from very far away, come online.
Hello, everyone. Everything you're about to hear is top secret proprietary, and you agreed to full confidentiality when you signed up and boarded the helicopter. As of last night, our electrical infrastructure grid has been under more cyber attack than usual, so much so they actually managed to knock out the dam.
Everyone seemed confused by this, as we'd never lost power, so Doug looked down, and Challenger had been looking up and searched for the disembodied voice, and then gave up and got bored and rested her head back down. The voice continued as if we all wouldn't have anything to think about by this news.
There wasn't an interruption because some brand new failsafes kicked in, and the dam went into manual mode. Technically, that's where the issue should have stopped, as we have many redundancies in place. However, in tandem with this unprecedented cyber attack, there was a physical element as well.
The voice continued more, barely giving time for the group to process.
Separatists have taken over the dam when it went into manual mode and capitalized on the automated defenses being down. Security was easily overrun, and what is technically a foreign power now controls the biggest, and otherwise most reliable, electricity contributor in our region. The engineers on site know how to get the system back online, but they are locked in a safe room that's independent of the larger system, as it predates the technology updates.
Someone started to get frustrated and asked where we fit in. They were wondering why the National Guard isn't taking care of it, why any one of the 100 other alphabet soup agencies aren't sending in their myriad of private militaries. The voice kept talking, despite the side chatter it seemingly couldn't hear.
The powers that be wish to keep this quiet. Every military black ops action has to eventually be accounted for, and they'd rather keep a soft coup off the books. Your mission is to infiltrate the dam perimeter, neutralize the separatists, and get the dam back online. A replacement security team will be there within 48 hours with updated orders, and will lock the place down. Shut your phones off and your radios and throw them in the protective bags you've been provided. No one can ever know you were here.
Doug assumed there was supposed to be more to the message, but it broke up into static. The feed was cut. Everyone got out their phones and radios and shut them off and threw them in the bags that the pilot had thrown back. They were strange bags that insulated the electronics from electronic signals. Concerts used them when people got pissy about people wanting to take a picture or two with their phone or record their favorite song. Doug had also recalled them being used if people were afraid of bad guys remotely compromising their phones and using them for listening devices or compromising data integrity. Doug had also recalled they came in handy when visiting foreign countries while in airports and hotels. Either way, everyone's phones and radios were now shut off, and that was that. Doug noticed it conveniently fit in one of Challenger's pockets, so that's where his went. Doug sat back and relaxed and dozed off for a bit. He hadn't slept much once the special alarm had gone off, which was basically a special issue watch turned red and started freaking out. Doug wasn't sure how long he'd been out, but it couldn't have been more than an hour or so until there seemed to be a commotion in the cabin. This jolted Doug awake, and he was immediately alert. Challenger was very upset and started growling and barking, not so much at people, but at the entire situation. Something shook the helicopter and the lights dimmed. Doug heard a startling voice from somewhere. "It happened again." The pilot came over the speaker. "Buckle. Something's wrong. We're losing. Everything's shutting. Taking down." There was more, but it was muffled as comms were now down, and he could only hear conflicting noise through the cabin. Doug saw in between flashes of snow that they were traveling really fast, and there were trees everywhere. Doug buckled up quick and put his legs around Challenger. He recalled that in video games, the first and sometimes even second helicopter sent to rescues always get knocked out of the air. They descended probably as controlled as possible before all of the remaining electronics in the helicopter ceased to function. Chapter 17, Doug, ground level, midday, day 1. Doug didn't remember very much. There were holes of the past 10 minutes missing. He looked at his watch and readjusted that assessment. There were holes of the past several hours missing. Next to his watch was his wristband. It was pointing off somewhere, then somewhere else. More of Doug's situational awareness came back. Doug realized he was sideways against a tree. It hurt to move, but he sat up properly, and thankfully he was wearing his snow gear.